Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the New Earth Leadership Summit, where we are guiding spiritual entrepreneurs to step into their personal power so that they can become the leaders of New Earth. And today I have with me a very awesome person. Her name is Amber Romaniuk, and she is an emotional eating, digestive, and hormone expert. And she helps professional women achieve health through mindfulness, self-care, and overcoming self-sabotage with food. Now, really quick, Amber, I just wanted to give you a big shout out to your podcast, the No Sugar Coating podcast, because you've had like over 1 million downloads now?
Yes, I have no words really. I'm still kind of like surprised, but yes, I'm like, where are all these people finding me?
That's
So
amazing.
grateful.
So yeah, go check out her podcast. You can find it on every major podcasting platform. It's the No Sugar Coating podcast. And you have like 300 episodes under your belt now.
Yes.
So talk to me about how this all started for you. So give us the backstory about how you got to be where you are now.
Yeah. So it's been quite the journey because all of what I have now in my business and like just quality of life got birthed through really struggling with, binge eating and body image issues and a very emotional relationship with food from a very young age. And I think just like a couple key highlighting moments that were really life changing for me. Number one was when I was 5 on the bus, and it was my first day. We had just moved to the country and I got on the bus and I was all excited to make new friends. And then all the older boys called me fat and ugly. And then it just like shattered my soul. And I was so upset. And then everyone was making fun of me. And then I took on the identities of I'm fat and ugly. And I felt very insecure and I didn't want to trust anybody. And that really shaped the next 20 years of my life. And then growing up, my mom had multiple sclerosis before I was born. She was diagnosed with it. And so for her to compensate, a lot of the things we would do together would revolve around food. And she also had a food addiction. I just didn't know until I healed and looked back that, some of that I inherited from her. And she didn't know any better, and neither did I. And then I started dieting in my teens. And of course, like Hollywood and media and magazines and like, right, all the images, celebrities, like we look and compare our bodies to these images that are so photoshopped, but they don't tell us it's photoshopped. And then we get hard on ourselves because we don't look like that. And then we are taught to diet and eat less and exercise more. And that's the narrative we're fed. And we assume that that's the only way. And the more we do that, the more out of touch we become. And that's what happened for me. And I was so asphyxiated with the number on a scale and the way that I looked that I really didn't realize that it was so much deeper than that. And then I started really binge eating heavily in my early 20s. After I'd lost weight really fast, I was the lowest. And then I went to the heaviest I had ever been and was just so ashamed and mortified. And, that really it had a tight grip on me for a few years before I really gained a handle with it. And I needed to have the low point moment because people always ask, well, what was the low point? What changed everything? And what changed everything was the night that I ate out of my garbage can. Like I finished a binge. I was laying on the couch just in so much discomfort and pain. And then I thought, well, if this is the last night I'm going to do this, I'm going to dig the cookies out and eat a couple more, right? That all or nothing mentality really kicked in. And so I dug through the garbage, ate the cookies, and I just sat on the floor and I just bawled. And I just was like, who am I? Like, how is this my life? This just does not feel like how things were supposed to unfold for me. I'm alone. I'm broke. I'm like 22 years old. I just ate out of a garbage. I'm unwell in every way. But I needed that to happen because I think something that blocks us from healing or taking steps to address self-sabotage in any form is we get in this comfort zone and it's like, yeah, I'm suffering, but it's familiar. I know I can use food if I'm suffering. I can keep focusing on like diets and the scale and exercise. This is my comfort zone. But what's uncomfortable is looking on a different path, dealing with my emotions, understanding what's triggering me to emotionally eat, why I'm using food as a coping mechanism, that food's addictive and I need to build those connections, how it's impacting my gut health, hormones, et cetera. Like that was a daunting path to consider because we wrap our identity up in these quick fixes. And then we go, well, who would I be if I didn't do this anymore? So the fear of change was freezing me and stopping me from going down that path. But then when that garbage moment happened, it shattered the fear of change. And in that moment, the suffering became bigger than the fear of the unknown and the change. And I went down that path. And obviously, it's a lot unfolded. But that's, I needed that to happen because it brought me to self-love. It brought me to identifying my triggers. It brought me to building self-care and having healthy ways to cope with stress and feel my emotions. It brought me to tapping into my intuition and my light and my spiritual gifts and this connection that I would have never have had to this level if I wouldn't have had to go through that.
God, and you just hit on something that it was part of your personal journey, but I see it reflected in the world overall right now. And you just said the suffering became bigger than the fear of change.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we are.
I agree.
That's where we are in society, right?
Yeah.
So, but what you're showing me is that even in our darkest hour, our greatest light is available. It was interesting because I was just having a conversation earlier with someone and she said almost the exact same thing. It's like the darkest hour and our most potential at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. And there was this voice that was just like, I know this doesn't feel right, but go down this path, just do it. You'll figure it out. And I had to trust that because there was nothing else that I had at that time.
Oh, man, it's such a powerful story. I've heard it before, but every time I hear it, I'm just like, I'm flooded with a feeling of warmth and appreciation for you for having the bravery to even go. Like sometimes hitting the bottom is one of the most healing places we can go.
Yeah.
Because it shows us the end. This is the end of this path. There is nothing on this path. Yeah. So if we keep repeating the same behavior and expecting a different result, we're suffering. We're just asking for more suffering.
Yeah.
So I want to guide this then to, so that's your personal journey to body freedom. So let's connect that to, how does body freedom connect to leadership?
It's everything, to be honest with you, because when you build this body freedom, you are so deeply tapped into your intuition. You are in your power. And when we are fighting with our bodies, fighting with food, overbooked, people pleasing, fearing everything, and anxiety, right? If you feel out of control with your body, you have stomach issues and you're gaining weight like crazy and you have brain fog and all these things, you're out of your power. Your ego, which is the negative voice in your head, is so in control that you can't be in your power, and you make decisions from lack and scarcity and fear. And so as you heal your relationship with food in your body, you learn how to take your power back from this ego, this part of you that's been so ingrained from society from a young age. And then you learn to let your intuition and power lead you instead. And that is pivotal for leadership, because if you're trying to be a leader, but you're people pleasing like crazy, you're not going to charge enough and you're going to end up resenting your clients. You are also going to keep in self-sabotage and then have so much deep shame and guilt, lowering your frequency because you're in fraud imposter syndrome and you're telling your clients to do one thing when behind the scenes you are still struggling with it, which there's no shame in that, but you've got to own and deal with your stuff, because you can't fully be in an integrity and leadership if you are telling people to do one thing and in the background you're doing something else. And I think the other reason, body freedom is so important for leadership is because you learn to be in your power, which means you access deeper levels of love, respect, compassion, understanding, self-forgiveness, and acceptance, which means then with others, if others have triggering moments, you're not projecting on them as much or at all. You're not blaming, you're not reacting, you're observing, and you can actually give them love and compassion and have more understanding for what they're going through without being triggered. And I think all of these things are so important, when you're stepping into leadership and strengthening your leadership, because the more insecure and out of power you are, the more you're going to project and react and not be able to hold the space for more people in your world. I think that's the last piece I want to share about this is if you're a business owner, or you're someone that wants to grow a business or a podcast or get more people into your programs, but you don't have capacity to take care of yourself, how are you possibly going to hold hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people in your programs, containers, etc., if you're exhausted and burnt out because you're not taking the time to make yourself a priority? So body freedom is about prioritizing yourself, declaring I am of high value. I may not fully feel it yet, but I'm going to get there. And as you do that, you strengthen your boundaries, you honor your worth, you respect yourself. And that to me is what creates amazing leadership.
Everything that you said, it's like I'm absorbing it all, and I love it. So I'm hearing how integrity with self is leadership from you. I'm hearing
Yes.
how prioritizing yourself allows you to be in integrity with yourself, which creates leadership.
Mhm.
I'm also hearing you say that by being in your body, it's going to help you stay in your personal power.
Yep.
And I, as a person myself who spent a lot of time in my higher frequencies and out of my body, I can totally. So I work with Amber, and I love working with Amber because she always helps me ground. That's what I need the most help with, is like get back in my body, love my body. Like we're
Mhm.
constantly reconnecting me back to the body. But she's so right, because how can you really be in your power if you're not in the vessel
Mhm.
that you came here to operate in?
Yeah. And one of the reasons why we get so ungrounded and our energy goes so outside of ourselves, and then we grasp at food to try and ground. But it's
Mm.
more of a quick fix to do that. It doesn't actually help us like fully get back in.
Right. We can do that without actually being in love, integrity, and appreciation
Yeah.
of our body. So absolutely, it's like we're misusing it's like misusing medicine in
Yeah,
a way,
totally.
right?
Exactly.
Oh, that's such a good point. So what is the most sensible advice you ever received around stepping into your personal power?
Have patience and compassion for yourself because it takes time to change it. When the ego has been so programmed, from such a young age, be patient and trust your unfolding and the divine timing of your journey, because we've been conditioned into such a quick fix society, and we assume, well, if I do this, listen to this thing once, or read this book once, or do this one meditation, that it's going to absolutely change everything. And whilst it may change you in the moment, it's building consistency, and it is really, trusting your path, and to not compare yourself to others, that you're here and they're there, and your body's here and they're there, and the success and the numbers and all of those things, because we can get caught up in that. And the pattern can just go from weight number diet focus to like social media number focus, right? Like it can morph.
Right.
So that's why I think the patience and the compassion for self are so important, because your journey is going to unfold the way that it's supposed to. And when I told that, and I'm still told that, it always brings me back to like being of service, trust, like gratitude. And those to me are just the foundational reasons to be serving a purpose here on this planet.
When you're working with people, is impatience like one of the top qualities that you see?
Oh yeah, especially with like weight loss, like how come my skin's not clearing up yet? I'm still bloated, like I need relief now. And it's like, okay, well, there's certain things we can do. However, like as an example, when your cortisol's through the roof, which is your stress hormone, right?
Mhm.
And it's so high that it might take a year to bring it down. Like it's not necessarily realistic to expect that your energy levels are going to be 10 out of 10 in a week or a month, right? Or
Yeah.
that you're going to release that abdominal weight more easily or have less cravings. Like same with the ego. If you've never worked on the ego before, you can't expect that you're going to just fully be in your power in a week or a month. Yes, you're going to make changes, but it takes time. And impatience is a very big emotion that the ego wants to bring front and center, because the ego is hoping that you'll get so impatient you quit and give up, and then it continues to call the shots. So try and, see the impatience, acknowledge it, but know, like, I'm just going to keep moving forward, and I know I'm going to get there.
So what do you do when you're working? So I think impatience is an important issue to touch on. I know this is about New Earth and leadership, and I
Oh,
think it ties in
yeah, it
because
does.
here we are on this precipice. We all feel it, and we're
Yeah.
all like, when the hell is it showing up?
Yeah.
And so I can see that just when I'm looking at just the bigger picture in general, that, you know, if we're sitting there waiting for something to happen, that's part of what's creating impatience. So we're looking at an end result, and rather than being in the process.
Mhm.
So bringing this back to, food and eating and body image, how would you guide someone who's really struggling with impatience? How would you guide them back to themselves?
Mhm. I think what's really important is to like show them the impatience and help them identify the impatience is from the ego, and you've literally been conditioned to be impatient and quick fix, want everything now. And so
Mhm.
knowing that, and then knowing that that hasn't served you and worked, and it's one of the reasons why you're still stuck in this cycle, when they start to understand that it's costing them more to let impatience lead them, right? What does it cost you physically? More bloating, more pain, more discomfort, more weight gain, more inflammation, etc. Emotionally, it's costing me, feeling more frustration, more anger, more hopelessness, more sadness, right? I'm not living my life fully because I'm going, oh, well, I'm going to wait until I'm this weight to date or grow my business or whatever. So I think showing them the costs of that emotion continuing to call the shots for them is really important, because then they go, wow, like that's having a significant impact on so many areas of my life. I don't want it to cost me that anymore. So I'm going to be aware of what triggers me to go into impatience. And then I'm going to do some form of like breath or meditation or self-care or tapping or journaling, or just have an affirmation that is like, I trust my path. I trust it's safe to take time to be on the journey. And by addressing the root issues, I'm actually going to get there this time, rather than, fumbling around with a bunch of different quick fixes and just continuing to get the same result and driving myself crazy. So part of it is talking about the ego and helping them to take their power back and understanding that impatience is ego, and then bringing in different tools to work on the mind. And of course, different energetic and spiritual practices to get them grounded into the body and back into the heart. Because when you're in your heart, you're in your power, and the impatience goes away.
Oh my gosh, you just said something that I heard. And I just saw the paradox as you were speaking about it. So you're talking about helping people guide them into their patience. And we're so impatient for results. And
Mhm.
yet you pointed out something where I was like, oh, damn, we all do that. So we're impatient for results, but we're willing to wait to show up until we get those results. So
Yeah.
we're not really, we have a capacity to wait for things,
Yep.
but we're not using it in a positive manner.
Correct. That's true.
That's kind of blowing my mind. I mean, it's something that, saying it out loud, I'm like, duh, but it's like hitting me about how conditioned we are to think of ourselves as impatient too. Like it's
Yeah.
almost rewarding in our society
Yeah.
to be like, I'm so impatient, I just have to
Yeah.
have it.
Totally. But this is what, when we know we can have it and then we don't go after it, it's fear that's freezing us, and doubt,
Mhm.
right? And like usually the only thing that's holding us back from doing this deeper work is the ego, is those emotions.
That's right. It's the only thing that's keeping us from stepping into leadership and
Yeah.
taking real action is the same feeling. It's
Oh,
the
totally.
same situation, different, story, but it's so interesting that we're willing to suffer in waiting for
Mhm.
something that we're unwilling to have patience for it to bloom. It's like we need to
Yeah.
start seeing ourselves as almost like a flower. You don't go out and yell at roses in May, you're not like,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, of course. But it's all the conditioning, right? It's just like, I
yeah.
want it now.
All right. So this is so good. I mean, I see so many parallels. So for those listening, I hope you're seeing the parallels that even though we are talking about our connection with the body, you can see that the way that you're treating your body, or what you expect from yourself on a physical level, you're doing energetically, you're doing it emotionally and spiritually. It's going to affect all the different levels.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a person who, like me, for a long time was out of alignment with her body, out of alignment with the body, but I have big spiritual dreams and I
Yeah.
have big spiritual energy. But we came here to be a body. If I was just supposed to be a spiritual being, I'd just be an orb of light floating around doing things.
Yeah.
So we need the body. We came here for the body. And I want to shift and talk about maybe the intention behind that. Like, why aren't we just orbs of light? Why do we need to bring new earth in a physical body? What is your take on that?
That's such a good question. I feel like it's because, number one, we come to this planet to learn how to love ourselves, and we need to go through these experiences with a physical and emotional body to struggle with weight, struggle with body image, struggle with the relationship with food, or whatever kind of self-sabotage, have ego. Like, I don't think if you're an orb of light, you can have an ego, right? And to experience
Probably
duality
not.
and fear, worry, all of these things. And there's certain lessons that we can't learn unless we have a physical body. The other thing that's so fascinating about the physical body is if we're having a physical symptom, that's the final plane of manifestation. So it's already broken through the spiritual, the energetic, mental, emotional, and now you have a physical symptom. And I think one of the biggest reasons why we live in a physical body is because we need to uncondition that your physical symptoms are random and for no reason, or you have bad genes or bad luck, and actually see that your physical symptoms are cues of past lives, so spiritual misalignment, of energy blocks, of emotional and physical, emotional, mental beliefs and stuck emotions and different things. Because when we can do this deep healing and step into our power and actually observe our physical symptoms, even when they're really, really, we feel a lot, we're suffering a lot, the healing that occurs, the emotional maturity, the calling in your team to ask for support and guidance and show me what to do and how should I address this, like, that's leadership, because you're leading yourself. Yes, you may get help to address those things, but it's you going like, instead of me really reacting and projecting and getting pissed off at my body, I'm going to try to neutralize my emotion, have compassion, and give that part of me love, because I know I'm going to figure it out. And I know there's messages and lessons for me. So I feel like that's a big reason why we come into a physical body, because there's just things we couldn't learn if we were just an orb. And it helps with our ascension and our evolution, because we're not going to be able to have stomach aches and bloating when we don't have digestive systems anymore. Right.
Right. Well, I mean, and what's interesting is, when I think about New Earth, right? So the energetics already exist on the other side, the non-physical. There's nothing to create. So
Yeah.
one of my perspectives about why we're here is purely for experience. I want to know I want to know what I'm really made of. I really want to know what I'm capable of, because I've, think about coming from a place where, let's say you're the color pink, for example, and the realm you come from is pink. It's all pink. There is no difference. There's nothing else there but pink. And so you don't know yourself because you are everything.
Yeah.
Everything's you.
Yeah.
And so this idea of individualizing, coming here and just being like, okay, what can Amber do?
Yeah.
Like I am coming in as Amber. What is she capable of? Like, let me stretch myself and experience what pink is. What if I drop into black? What's pink, versus black? So I really
agree.
feel like part of the reason we're here physically, and I'm sure if I were to tap into this on a psychic level, there's so much our physical body. Well, first of all, we have maps all over our body, as you know. But we have like maps in our hands, in our ears, in our eyes, on our feet. I mean, like everywhere there's little indicators about you.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, just every point you're making is so good. It's so important for us, even as we're focusing on the spiritual, even as we're focusing on what we want to bring in, that we have to remember we have to take us with it.
Yeah. It's true. And I think with the impatience thing, to just go back to that for a moment, if we do too much too fast, whether it's energy work or a cleanse or anything, and we do it too fast and overwhelm our bodies, we can go into healing crisis physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically, spiritually. And so that's also why it's so important for us to like pace ourselves, because you don't end up in that either.
So true. And you and I often talk together about ascension and ascension symptoms. And one of the things we both notice is that the universe, the sun, isn't dosing us all at once. It's giving us like micro doses.
Yes.
Sometimes it gives us a little more, sometimes a little less, but just enough to help us digest the new downloads, assimilate them in our body, and start to rebalance, because we've talked about this. So let's talk about ascension symptoms really quick. What are some that you've had recently for yourself?
So like a reset of my cycle, my menstrual cycle completely, and purging out old cellular debris. Past was more like digestive, like literally purging everything out, again, releasing cellular debris. Lower back ache the day before it really, the 5D light coding comes in, brain fog, nausea, really lightheaded, wanting to sleep more. Those would be some of the ones that I have experienced quite a bit.
Right. And I like recently, there was one just a few days ago where again, nausea was like the predominant one. And I know that these are like codes that are coming in and they're shifting something. And like you had just said, when there's a purging or a detoxing happening, I mean, let's just talk about detox on the physical level and then we'll compare it to a spiritual type detox. So
Mm.
when someone detoxes, what are some things that they're going to experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, the body is spilling out all these toxins and it does overwhelm the body temporarily. So it could be headaches, it could be flu-like symptoms, headaches, nausea, stuffy noses. You could have more bowel movements or less. It could be more brain fog, anger, especially if you're detoxing the liver.
Mm.
Some people will have more cravings, some less, increased, decreased appetite levels. So that's why it's important to be gentle when you're detoxing, because if your body can't handle the load well, you're going to have significant symptoms and it could like startle you, or you could feel like, don't do this because it's making something worse. So that's why I believe in slow and steady with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're always encouraging me to choose the gentler version of detox because I'm always so Aries gung ho. Like I'm like, let's clean it out. And then
No.
you're like, nope, 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 no.
Gentle.
Gentle, gentle. Yeah, it's always like dandelion root tea now. It's like a very calming, gentle way. But you're making such a great point here. There's a lot that the body's doing when it's
Yes.
rebalanced. So a detox is a rebalance, right? We're resetting or rebalancing our system.
Yeah.
And there is the spiritual version of that. And that's happening not only individually, but it's happening collectively that we're going through this. So your impression of the time period we're in, I feel like it's a collective, like it's a real strong detoxification. Like
Oh yeah.
it's very polarizing.
Yeah.
But I think it's preparing us for what's coming. That's really
Agreed.
well. So what's your perspective on like, give me your idea of New Earth, because I'm so interested in how people perceive it.
Oh my goodness. People taking ownership and responsibility. I think that, people being really open and willing to work on their stuff to heal, right? I think it's like collaboration and community and like connection and love and compassion, and there's no competition and this person and numbers and, oh, well, you don't have enough followers and like all of those superficial ego-based things. And I think it's also, people being willing to, I guess that's the ownership piece and, do their deeper work. I just think that we've been so pulled away from that. And I know a lot of us are doing it, but a lot aren't. And so I also think New Earth is like the most healthy, clean, like beautiful food that we've ever ingested in our lives. And like everyone has a garden and like farming is local again. And like all the big food is gone and pharma. And like there's all these healing modalities and technologies that are brought front and center. And like all the things we're talking about are taught in school. And it's something that you learn from a very young age, right? It's just like
Yeah.
free and peace and ease, and people are really inspired to be in their gift and not like, I have to go get a crappy job. Like you do what you want and you create success with it because it's your passion, and that's what it should be all the time.
I love that. I love the idea of, I mean, can you imagine if we had been taught to respect the body, but also to have a healthy relationship with food at a young age?
Oh my gosh, would have been a life
And
changer.
right? I mean, we're here to bring that forward. That's my whole point in this conversation, is that whatever inspires each of us, this is the area where we have effectiveness.
Yeah.
Right. So hearing you talk about it, and I know how passionate you are about helping people eat clean and understanding the some of the things that are going into our body, because I mean, you often point out how the food that is processed right now is really being used to control
Yep.
us on a physical level, but also a mental level. I mean, can
Yeah.
you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, a lot of the foods, quote unquote, made in labs, they calcify the pineal gland, and then we can't have discernment and we can't sense deception. And it in a sense, like really dumbs us down. And then we don't critically think. And I remember being that person before I started learning about refined sugar and all these ingredients I was putting in my body. And as I cleaned up my eating and started eating more whole foods, I started waking up. And the first thing was to the food industry and the corruption, and then pharma, and then everything else, a couple of years ago. But I wouldn't have done that if I wouldn't have cleaned up my pineal gland. And the other thing too, is all these processed foods are coated and low frequencies are emitted into them. And then it lowers our frequency. And then we're less able to tap into our intuition because we're shutting our light off. And the more brain fog you have, the more tired you are, like, you're probably not going to be as inspired to want to like put time and energy into like healing and then being aware of what's going on in the world. Right. So I feel like it's like the movie Wall-E, where they depict the fat, lazy society flying around in little bubbles, eating, really crappy processed food all the time, dumbed down, and just like literally eating and gaining weight and not doing anything else. Like that is what they wanted.
Oh yeah.
And you see the infiltration in food, and you go to the grocery store and all the top 10 corrupt food companies in the world, all their product is front and center by the checkout when you first walk into the store. Like they pay extra to have those spots, right?
Yeah.
So they know how to entice people and get people addicted, and then they have lifetime customers.
Yeah. I mean, and it's so prevalent. So if someone was listening to this, and let's say they're listening and they're realizing, man, a lot of this is resonating and I want to make a shift. And I'm overwhelmed with where to start. What would you advise?
Yeah. So I think number one, like, have love and compassion for yourself. There's nothing wrong with you. You haven't done anything wrong. It's not your fault. This is emotional eating, binging and purging. Any kind of emotional relationship with food is very complex, physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically, and spiritually. And then it's to start to build awareness. Like, what are the things that trigger you to go to food? Like, start making a list. I think it's also important that you start to, decipher the differences between physical and emotional hunger, because they are very different. Like, emotional eating is any reason to eat other than physical nourishment, boredom, sadness, happy, overwhelm, reward, punishment for gaining weight on the scale, right? Like seeing a food and then wanting to eat it, starting to eat a food and then losing control, versus physical hunger is like, I get a hunger signal, and if you don't, your thyroid's probably off. Stomach growling, low energy, blood sugar drops, hangry, faint, dizzy, lightheaded. You look at the clock and you see, haven't eaten in a few hours. So I think that's another first step, is to start to differentiate between physical and emotional hunger. And then my third little tidbit would be like, start dedicating and making sure you're taking time to eat mindfully through the day without distraction, no technology, no phones, computers. Sit at your kitchen table or your desk, shut off technology, sit and eat your food mindfully, because it's going to start to help you tune into how full you are. And then if you finish that and you want to keep digging through the cupboard, you're going to be able to start catching that it's more emotional.
That's such a good point. Yeah. And the whole technology distraction, that's it. And especially like, we're talking to entrepreneurs, we're talking to people who basically live on technology because it's their business. So why is it important as a leader to give yourself that space? I mean, we talked about why it's important for your body.
Yeah.
Finding the work-life balance. I know that's something that you talk about too. That's really important part of it. What's happening for a person when they just can't shut that off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I have a lot of clients who are business owners, and it's like this need, I've got to grow. There's a lack leaving them. I've got to make more money. So I've got to be on more. I've got to be doing more. But what's below that is unworthiness. I don't feel good enough. So I've got to prove, I've got to show up all the time. And then if you're in any kind of perfectionist, all or nothing, people pleasing mentalities, you're giving too much to others. You don't have boundaries with yourself or your schedule. You need to prove, because maybe you got bullied in school and you're like in the mentality of, I'm going to show you all now, right? There's that kind of thing that comes up. And if you're taught you have to do everything perfectly, even though that doesn't exist, when these ego-based emotions are leading us, we will feel very resistant to want to have healthy boundaries with technology, to shut it off for a few minutes to eat our food. And then the ego convinces us, well, stopping technology to eat my food, like, what is that going to do? But when my clients start to do that, they have significant improvements in their digestion. Their urge to emotionally eat goes away, and they feel more satiated and satisfied. And then they feel proud and confident that they're making themselves a priority. And then that, when you go back on social media or technology, floods out, because now you're more in your power, you're more confident, you're satisfied, you're not bloated. Like, if you're bloated and in pain after you eat, you're really going to be excited to go and do your Instagram live, record that podcast, go speak at that conference? Probably not. That's why this is so important, because the way you behave with food in your body is going to dictate the way you fully directly, the way you show up in your business, how much money you make, your reach, your frequency, all of it.
Oh, that's such a good point. So it's so interesting because, and the reason why I want to have Amber on is because leadership starts in these small ways,
Yes, it
right?
does.
I have in the past really globalized leadership, that it means that I'm doing something big at the front of something that people can see. And the more I dig into it, the more I understand there is this, leadership has a lot to do with being self-led,
Mhm.
right? But like she said, by creating these boundaries, by recognizing that I need to prioritize myself first. No one is going to be here doing it. And a
Exactly.
true leader would show up for themselves naturally. They'd lead themselves first.
Yeah.
So I love everything that you're bringing to the table. So I have a question sort of outside this, but I think it can connect to what we're talking about. And the question is, what is one tangible step that you think we can all take that would help us achieve the vision of New Earth that you talked about?
I think it's honestly like doing healing work with our ego, because the more we can learn how to recognize it and take our power back, the higher our frequency. And the more of us that have a higher frequency, well, guess what? Collectively, that raises the vibration of the planet, and that
Mhm.
helps us get there. Obviously, it's going to take the time it's going to take, but we manifest it more easily, right? We lighten the load. We get
Yeah,
rid of all of the energetic and emotional baggage that, is too heavy to come with us.
absolutely. I mean, man, if there a significant group of people spent more time doing that ego work, we
Mhm.
would definitely see a shift in society.
Yes,
We would see it.
huge. Because right now
So,
what you're seeing is the face of the ugly ego that is front and center in society right now, in my
right.
opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a mirror for us,
Yeah,
really. And,
totally.
that's why I wanted to talk about this, because again, when we think about what can I do to help the earth or help us get here, we tend to externalize what
Yeah.
we're going to do. But we're
Yeah.
only capable of giving from what we give ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
And so I love that this conversation is really bringing us back to personal responsibility within ourselves. How do I take care of myself? How am I loving myself?
Mhm.
How am I patient or not patient with myself? Where am I still, constantly beating myself up or being
Mhm.
too hard on myself?
Yeah.
Because if I'm doing that to me, then I'm going to do that to the people that I feel separated from. So the
Yep.
people that I
Yes.
love, I'm going to be very gentle with them, but those who I have lower tolerance for are going to get the treatment
Mhm.
that I give myself.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And then that just lowers our frequency, and then we have more conflict in the collective.
Right. So yeah, we're watching collectively wounded
Yeah,
ego behavior. And
exactly.
I love that you're bringing it back to, again, the answer is work on your own, heal yourself, because from that place you can then, nurture someone else. And
Yeah,
then if that person takes that in and takes it on, then it's just the chain reaction, and it can go really fast, actually.
it can. Yes. And that's the great thing about it, right?
Oh yeah,
And
I have so much hope,
me
by the
too.
way. I mean, like, and I know we talk about this all the time, but I really am, like, when I look into the future, it is so beautiful. And yet, just like you were talking about with patience, impatience,
Mhm.
it only is going to come to us as we walk towards it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that a lot of us are waiting for it to come to us.
Yeah.
Like it's going to just sweep over us. And a part of me wants that. I mean, a part
Yeah,
of
it'd
me
be
would love
great.
it if it just this wave of love swept over us and we were like free. But
Yeah,
I honestly think it's something that it's there, but where we have to move towards it.
I
And
agree.
so the goal in this conversation is just how everybody tell each other how you see that happening. So I love that your point is, the love and compassion and understanding and gentle and nurturing to with yourself, giving that to yourself is the walk forward. It's the
Mhm.
path
Yeah.
forward into that new space. So if you could teach the world just one concept, then what would it be?
Oh, I do feel like it would be how to master your ego, because once you do that, you're really free, and you know that your ego as a teacher, because the ego has a huge influence on emotional eating and, delaying your good and not taking care of yourself and not showing up in your business, etc. So that to me is everything. Yeah, how to master your ego and how to take your power back from it. And then the tools that you can use if it comes back in, because it will.
Yeah. So what I want to let the audience know is that if this conversation is really resonating for you and you feel like it's touching on a personal experience you're having, and you want to get in touch with that more, get in touch with your body, get in touch with your relationship with food more, Amber has a free emotional eating quiz that you can take, and you'll see the link here that you can jump on. It'll also be with this video so that you can just click on it and go give that a shot. I'm telling you, since I started working with Amber, so much has changed, so much peace and love in my body. I mean, my personal story is similar to Amber's in a way that I was using my body weight, my body size to determine my self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt so worthless because I also felt really out of control with it. It wasn't something I had a relationship with. It was happening to me, or at least that's how it felt.
Mm-hmm.
And since working with Amber, we've been really focusing on healing and nurturing, and my body may or may not shift, but I'm in love with my body and I appreciate my body more and more every day. And just like she talked about doing that ego work, because your ego is so freaking tricky.
Yeah,
your ego
sneaky.
is your master chess player. It is it'll master you. So even when you think you have overcome it, it will adapt its strategy and keep going.
It's true.
It's
so
true.
It'll dialing it in.
That's right. It's amazing. So Amber is an absolute expert at helping people get in touch with that, get in touch and understand what's going on in the mindset, what's going on in the behavior. And she has such a beautiful way of holding you accountable without making you feel awful, which is so important because it's a tricky process to get back in alignment with yourself, especially, when we're still conditioned, right? We're still being bombarded constantly with messages about who we should be, what we should be doing, and it's like, just as soon as it stopped being about the waist, it was about the butt, and then it'll be about something else.
Oh, totally. It'll keep going.
Right. So I want to talk to the audience about how they can work with you. So what are the things that you are offering that the audience can participate in? Because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who want to know more.
For sure. So if you're like, I would just want to taste that, the podcast is a great place to start. Cause like you said, there's over 300 episodes, the No Sugarcoating podcast. You can start listening to that. If you want to start with like something that's more of an intro offer, I have a 5-week self-study group, or like I guess it's just on your own freedom from emotional eating course that you can like dive into and get into right away. And then if you're really curious, you're like, I want to do this, but I want like a higher level of support, you can book a body freedom call at amberapproved.ca. It's 30 minutes, it's 50 USD. And then we can connect one-on-one and talk about your struggles, your goals, where you're seeking support, what's holding you back. And if one-on-one support is a good fit, or to be put on a wait list for a future group program.
That's so exciting. And I would recommend the call because Amber is quite intuitive and she can laser in really fast on what's going on in there. It's amazing. Like just from day one, when we started working together, the information that you shared with me just about the liver stuff, like that set me free emotionally immediately, because I was holding blame over myself for something that was going on physiologically. So I highly recommend it. Amber's so valuable in what she's giving to people. It really is life-changing. And it really can help you step into that place of personal power, which is where you're going to be able to take leadership from. So Amber, I want to thank you so much for giving us time and coming on to the summit. The words that you shared, I cannot wait to kind of go. I took so many notes and I can't wait to go back over it, because there was a few gems in there where I was like, oh my God, right. That makes so much sense. Waiting for, impatience versus waiting for the perfect outcome. That one I think is going to stick with me. I'm going to be contemplating that for a while.
That's a biggie.
It is. So thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's just been an honor. And thank you for creating this. We need more of this in the world right now.
Yay. Well, thank you everyone who are watching, and I will see you in the next episode of the New Earth Leadership Summit.